Welcome to this webinar of the Global Tourism Plastics Initiative. I am Virginia Fernandez-Trapa, Program Officer at the United Nations World Tourism Organization, and would like to thank you for your interest in the important topic of plastic pollution. I am joined by my colleague Roxana Ashtari and colleagues from the United Nations Environment Program, as well as a panel of signatories to the Global Tourism Plastics Initiative. Today, we will be presenting a new report with key messages related to single-use plastic products and their alternatives, as well as some of the strategies that our members are implementing to eliminate problematic and unnecessary plastics, innovate to integrate reuse models, and circulate so that plastics stay in the value chain and out of the environment. Hopefully, we will also have time for a Q&A session with our audience at the end. Before we start, let's watch the welcome remarks from Dr. Dirk Lesser, Director of Sustainable Development of Tourism Department at UNWTO. Edgardo, please, if you could play the remarks.
I am Dirk Lesser, Director of the Sustainable Tourism Department at UNWTO, and I would like to give you a warm welcome to our today's webinar on Eliminate, Innovate, Circulate. This is the second webinar we conduct to present to you the practical approaches from signatories of the Global Tourism Plastics Initiative, tackling the plastic pollution. We also use today's webinar to announce the 30 new signatories which have committed since our last webinar to the Global Tourism Plastic Initiative. With them, the initiative counts now on 91 influencing stakeholders from the tourism sector, from big to small, from the north to the south, from the west to the east, all confirming their commitment to eliminate unnecessary and problematic plastics, the integration of reuse models and reusable alternatives, the engagement of suppliers and waste managers, and communicating progress to all stakeholders, including the travelers. All of you have made contact with our wonderful and dedicated colleagues, Svitlana Milkalieva, Pablo Montes, Gerald Nava, Virginia Fernandez-Trapa, and Roxana Ashtari from UNEP, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and UNWTO. Together, we have launched this initiative at the beginning of last year at Fitur. The month which followed were the most devastating for tourism ever. But this growing number of signatories demonstrates that the tourism sector has not rested during this pandemic. It also shows that the needed transformation of tourism towards a more sustainable and resilient sector can become reality. I close by recalling that just some few weeks ago, the tourism ministers of the G20 stressed the importance of this transformation through their own communiqué and welcomed guidance provided through the recommendations for the transition to a green travel and tourism economy, which UNWTO prepared. In there, the Global Tourism Plastic Initiative is prominently featured. I thank all the signatories for their commitment and the leading role they are taking within the tourism sector. I wish you an inspiring seminar. Thank you.
It is really great to see so many people connected with us. Thank you very much to the audience for their interest. And the next point in today's agenda is a presentation that will help us set the scene for the discussions and that addresses one of the aspects that has been identified by our signatories as key. As you know, there is no one recipe that would work for us all as we advance towards a circular economy of plastics, given the importance of the context in which we operate and the importance of local waste management capabilities. Nevertheless, we can try to do our best to base decisions in available evidence. And this is why we are happy to release today a summary report on the conclusions of life cycle assessments of some single-use plastic products, which hopefully can help us avoid unintended environmental impacts when we are selecting alternatives for plastics that are eliminated. My colleague Pablo Montes, member of the coordination team of the initiative and also private sector engagement specialist at UNEP, will be sharing with us the main messages in the report. Pablo, please, the floor is yours. Could we get Pablo's slides up, please?
Thank you, Virginia. Great. So while we perfect. Thank you, Roxana. So thank you all. Looking forward to this session today. Some of the first sessions that come to mind when trying to reduce pollution from plastic products are which products should be used then, and then which alternative is better. The answer, as you might anticipate, is not a straightforward one, and certainly not specific to the tourism sector. Hence, the request that was posed by the UN Environment Assembly to UNEP back in March 2019, in which UNEP was requested to make available existing information on the full cycle environmental impacts of plastic products compared to products of alternative materials. In answer to this, the UNEP-hosted Life Cycle Initiative conducted a series of analysis of existing life cycle assessment reports on single-use plastic products and their alternatives, and then developed a high-level summary report that integrates these findings, or the findings from these studies, to support policymaking on single-use plastic products. The Global Tourism Plastics Initiative developed this document that we're launching today to summarize the reports from the Life Cycle Initiative and the UNEP team, and contextualize them in the perspective of the tourism sector. Next slide, please. Which is the report that you see on the screen. The most important findings of these reports are contextualized and put and translated to a certain extent to the reality and to the operations and to the needs of the tourism sector. The objective and the intention is to use the same science that supports policymaking on single-use plastic products to make it accessible for decision-making by tourism businesses, especially those that are part of the Global Tourism Plastics Initiative. The single-use plastic products that are covered by this new publication include single-use plastic bags, bottles, takeaway food packaging, cups, and tableware. But before we move on to the specifics of the findings, and as we transition to the next slide, we would want to provide some context on an approach that underlies these publications. Next slide, please. Which is the concept of life cycle thinking and life cycle assessments as being a quantitative tool to support this life cycle thinking. Life cycle thinking, to begin with, looks beyond the impacts that are usually looked into during the production phase and considers the impacts that are caused throughout the life cycle of a product. Life cycle assessment is a quantitative tool that seeks to quantify these impacts across various environmental categories, plastic pollution being one of them, but certainly looking also into climate change, biodiversity loss, ozone depletion, etc. That being said, life cycle assessments themselves rely on data and the resources available to process, collect, and analyze the data. However, going back to life cycle thinking, even if there's some limitations and there's always so much available data, going back to life cycle thinking is essential to avoid shifting the burden from plastic pollution to other environmental or social problematics, and above all, strive towards an overall reduction in environmental impacts while providing the same or an even better guest experience. Moving on to the next slide, we'll present the 8 principles for action that the Global Tourism Plastics Initiative is putting forward to guide these approaches, the approaches that we'll hear more about during the presentation today, towards the elimination of pollution from single-use plastic products and the reduction of environmental impacts related to the use of single-use plastic products and their alternatives by tourism businesses. This is just to emphasize that the interest is not to eliminate one problem by causing another, and have a comprehensive approach that overall reduces the environmental footprint of the operations. But let's go back to the first questions that come to mind when trying to reduce pollution for plastic products. What products should be used then, and which alternative material is better? And the answer, as you might all anticipate, is not a pretty straightforward one, or at least not entirely. So these 8 principles should help, and we hope they help tourism businesses to take a comprehensive approach to achieve this goal. I'll start with the ones that you see on the screen and refer to the fact that the best product to reduce plastic pollution is the one that is not used at all. Hence the emphasis of the Global Tourism Plastics Initiative to begin by eliminating all unnecessary and problematic plastic products, which is usually the case for single-use plastic products. The second best option then is to use multi-use product, regardless of the material, and given that certain conditions are met. Hence the need and the emphasis on systemic change that includes procedures, revision of standards, creating a dedicated or the right supporting organizational structure for this sort of change, and training. Which brings me to the third point on the relevance and importance of engaging staff, as well as customers, the guests, because they play a central role in the functioning of these systems and ensuring that those products that are multi-use are in fact used multiple times. And you can see some examples of the benefits from transitioning to a multi-use product with the figures that you see on the screen by a stainless steel use cup, which the benefits are only achieved once certain number of uses are being secured. Moving on to the next slide, we'll cover a couple of considerations that are better assessed and understood through a close collaboration with suppliers. And this can be directly with your suppliers or in coordination with tourism associations, peers, and government authorities. Production still remains as the main part of the footprint, of the whole footprint, then the importance of seeking ways to reduce it, engaging the suppliers to understand what's the type of energy that is being used in the production of the plastic items and or the sourcing of the raw materials that they use, for example, for packaging. One of the questions is the content, is the plastic or other material that is being used include recycled content or not? The fifth element refers to the design element and the role that design can contribute to reduce the environmental impacts throughout the whole life cycle. Then the importance of finding a product that fits the needs, different needs that are throughout the operations, while being durable and functional. Examples of that is finding the right bag, plastic bag, to be used indoors or outdoors, or the use of aluminum containers that have a lifespan larger than other items, and that allow, in consequence with what we were talking before, allow for a much higher number of uses. Then there's another series of considerations, 6 and 7, that seek to ensure that once the product is used, there's the proper means for efficient washing, such that there's not a higher footprint there. And in case that it's not a reusable product, that the product is properly disposed, striving for the ideal situation of it being recycled, and striving to avoid the worst case scenario, that is the product ending up at being littered and in the ocean or in the ecosystems that the tourism sector benefits from. And then finally, everything is, all these elements are needed to be evaluated in context. So in the next slide, and you'll see that there's a series of considerations that pertain to the context of the destination and the nature of the operations of the tourism business itself to take into consideration the principles that we have been talking through. On this point, I'm going on to the next slide. The report includes matrices, especially or at the moment for single-use cups and tableware, for tourism businesses to identify the most appropriate options, either glass, aluminum, plastic, or even single-use versus multi-use, for each operational context, taking into consideration the variables such as the level of engagement of staff and guests on sustainability, the availability of waste management infrastructure, and even the energy source used to power the dishwasher machines or to heat the water that is being used for washing. In conclusion, and as mentioned early on, the response is not fully straightforward, and ideally this document and the principles that have been outlined in the document and the details for each of the products that I have mentioned before will help you and others go through the decision-making process to reduce and eliminate plastic pollution from single-use plastic products. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pablo, for presenting so swiftly the main principles recommended in this new publication released by the Global Tourism Plastics Initiative. Definitely provides a solid basis for the discussion and later the Q&A. I would now like to invite our panelists to please turn on their cameras and join me on stage so that we can start with the panel discussion. Our objective with this panel discussion would be to showcase some of the strategies that you as signatories are following to implement your commitments to the Global Tourism Plastics Initiative, to also showcase the roles that your different organizations play in the initiative, and ultimately to inspire other organizations to join us in this journey towards a circular economy of plastics. My first question is for Joshua. Joshua Wong is a corporate sustainability manager at the Hong Kong and Shanghai Hotels Limited. Joshua, you represent the oldest registered company in Hong Kong, which has luxury properties in 10 cities. Of course, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Beijing, Tokyo, Bangkok, Manila, New York, Chicago, Beverly Hills, Paris, and even 2 new ones coming up in London and Istanbul, all known as the Peninsula Hotels. Already back in 2018, you transitioned away from single-use plastic straws and stirrers, and since then you have continued advancing in the shift towards a circular economy of plastics. Could you tell us some of the recent changes that you feel most proud of, and how they connect with your new strategy, Vision 2030? Also, which would you say are still the main barriers to achieving a circular economy of plastics in your operations?
Sure, happy to share with that. So I think we have started our sustainability journey back in 2007, and all the initiatives were mainly surrounding the traditional concept of, reduce, reuse, recycle, and repurpose model. Within our operations, I think our team has been very engaged with these programs, and we have been doing recycling of papers, metal, glass, plastic, other soap bars, food waste, coffee grounds, etc., etc. However, if you talk about circular economy, I think one of the key challenge is still a lot of our staff, or even if you talk about circular economy, many of them haven't heard of this term yet. And I think my job, especially in the new strategy, which is called Vision 2030, the next 10-year strategy, we really want to bring this circular economy concept to everyone. And I think it's really about bringing the traditional waste management programs to the next level. I would say it's more about how we can create a program with a really meaningful story, plus it can be sustained in a circular way. We have already piloted in the past 2-3 years, piloted several innovative projects, including oyster shells upcycling to rebuild their habitat project. We upcycle our mooncake box to produce a 3-to-1 board games. We have our retired linen products to a children's bathroom, which can also be turned into a teddy bear. And I think what we're trying to do is to showcase the idea of circular economy, and later on empower them to identify more opportunities later on. And I think one of the challenge that we still remain as the sustainability expert, I think in the past, during the experience that we are changing our bathroom amenities product, it took us around 2 years to do so, because first, I think there's a lack of research and data to support our decision. We can only make decision based on the materials being used. And then also back then, 2 years ago, there's still not a lot of people understand what is compostable, what is biodegradable, what is the true meaning of these terms. And also there's another complication of, you have to have a composter in your local facilities, local to compost those materials. So having compostable materials still may not be, the best option that you could find. So I think it's really about we have to think about these issues in a very multidimensional ways. For example, I think what Pablo have just mentioned is a very good study, because I think these are the questions that the data I haven't seen before, that if there is a reuse model is actually much more sustainable than any single-use items or whatever. So it's actually quite interesting to have those information to back up our decision. And also, I think it's about, you have to keep on looking, asking your suppliers, challenging them, so that they will give you different options. And then, well, and also because the world has been changing so quickly with this issue, there's so many new innovations coming in every day. We have to keep looking, keep asking, and stay humble with that. So I think this is some of the sharing that I have.
Thank you so much, Joshua. Very inspiring. Thank you for sharing with us how you're addressing the implementation of your strategy, Vision 2030. And I mean, it's absolutely clear that decisions need to be made quite carefully to consider all the possible impacts of the changes that we're planning to introduce. Thank you so much. I'll ask now a question to Julie. Julie Allison is Vice President for Sustainability and Transformation at Accor. Accor Group represents a portfolio of 39 hotel brands, from luxury to economy, and more than 5,000 hotels and residences across 110 destinations, all of them committed to sustainable value creation via your Planet 21 strategy. With your strategy, as well as with your commitments, Julie, to the Global Tourism Plastics Initiative, you have set the ambitious goal of eliminating single-use plastics by 2022. And you have also remarkably maintained your timeline despite going through COVID. So could you tell us how you're managing to, for example, spread the logic of reduce single-use plastics instead of replace them across your many properties? And how do you accommodate the needs of the different global regions when making those changes? Also, please do not hesitate to share any of additional highlights with the audience.
Thanks, Virginia. And yes, happy to share this. As you have just stressed, we are worldwide, which is a very different kind of challenge when you're trying to reduce single-use plastic, eliminate it all over the world at the same time. We have had a number of challenges with COVID, like all of you online, which is a setback because obviously hotels were shut down, so projects were stopped or slowed down. We were supposed to renew our Planet 21 strategy, and we postponed this for a year because there was just no activities in the hotels or throughout the group. But nevertheless, after studying and collaborating with the teams, we have maintained the engagement. So this has not changed. And so Accor is still aiming for the elimination of all single-use plastic by end of 22, which is a very ambitious target. I think we're the only worldwide hospitality group to have set such a target, because it's basically eliminating all single-use plastic from the guest experience by 2022, which is a deadline that's coming up fast. So happy to dive into this a little bit, Virginia, and explain how this is unrolling within Accor. I think the first step to actually getting something done, as is often the case, is a very strong CEO commitment behind it, which we have because Sébastien Bazin, our chairman and CEO, stepped up in January 2020 and decided to commit to getting rid of that single-use plastic. He did it very publicly with your help and support as well. And so that's the first step. Second step, I think, is having very strong governance behind the project. We have a very involved team, but we have been joined also by Brune Poisson, who is now our Chief Sustainability Officer at Accor. And Brune is the person who actually designed and worked on the anti-waste law in France. So obviously she is very engaged in fighting single-use plastic, in limiting plastic leakage, so that definitely helps. And then, of course, it's a question of collaboration across the group and the teams. So we have this central CSR team that is actually working with relays across the group in each and every one of our 8 hubs across the world. And these teams are obviously working hand in hand with marketing and commercial teams, because they are the ones who are putting plastic elimination into the brand standards. They're working close with procurement teams who are sourcing. And as Joshua was saying just a minute ago, sourcing is definitely one of our challenges. And we're also working hand in hand with our design teams to make sure that this rolls out properly. So the first step would be like having a proper organization and governance to get rid of the plastic. What is going on at the same time is raising awareness. And I think we all have the same issue. Joshua, you mentioned it again as well. We are actually working hard on raising awareness in terms of making our hoteliers and guests understand that less is more is actually a valid approach, that you do not replace a product with another one if you can avoid it. So very much based on this idea of reduce, reuse, recycle, but before you do anything else, just reduce. So that takes a lot of education across the group, just basically making people understand that a product should actually never be disposable, whether it's plastic or glass or anything else really. If you can avoid having disposable product at all, that's the approach we are favoring. So this is and with guests, it has become more difficult. We haven't touched on this as well, but I'm sure it will be developed further on, because COVID obviously has been a step back in terms of guest experience. We also constantly need to remind guests that it's not because an object is wrapped in plastic that it's actually safer. And I know that this was stressed in several of your reports, Virginia, so thank you for outlining this as well. So there you go. So just a quick word on how we are progressing as a group today. We have eliminated plastic straws, stirrers, cotton buds. That was done by the end of 2020 already, because it had been anticipated. We are progressing well with the replacement of amenities. Dispensers are being rolled out across the group. There's been a lot of work on dry amenities as well. First to reduce them, and then to source the right kind of products for those we are maintaining. And so we are on track. We are pretty much on track for end of 2022, with of course a lot of effort remaining to be done, more sourcing going on, and hotels being allowed to use any stock that they still have, because unfortunately, since activity was stopped, they did have a lot of stock. So they're going to have to go through this before the objects disappear. We are encountering, maybe just a word on this, Virginia, because I think it's also the point of this webinar, is just being able to exchange on what is more challenging today. We are encountering a number of challenges. Obviously, regions are not the same across the world. They have very different regulations. They also have very different recycling systems. They have very different development stages. So one of our challenges is actually being able to set a dialogue up with each of our hubs to make sure that we get them the right solutions. I'm very much in line with Joshua's point on not necessarily having the right data all the time. We're constantly working on getting new life cycle assessments, getting new accurate data, just to make sure that we can push the right solutions. I definitely think that one of the risks in single-use plastic elimination is that everyone actually wants to do that, but it's actually very easy for people, even with the best of intentions, to actually get the wrong thing. I mean, in terms of products, we have seen solutions that were cardboard, but that had massive amounts of plastic in them. We've seen solutions that were plant-based because this is so attractive, but then you realize that they actually come from agriculture, so it's not the solution either. We have all these issues that we're dealing with. So basically, it's just being able to advise properly, make sure they get the right amount of information, and make sure that we can get them the right sources across the group, depending on the regions. So that's where we are. I'd say that it is feasible. We have a number of hotels that are very advanced already. Over 60% of our hotels have already started eliminating plastic water bottles and installing water filtering systems. So we're really going forward with this. And so hopefully we'll meet the end of 2022 deadline. Thank you, Virginia.
Thank you so much, Judy. It's really fantastic to hear how you have managed to maintain that target, that timeline. And I mean, I think we all concur with you that this is definitely a continuous learning process. And that's why at least one of the missions we see for the Global Tourism Plastics Initiative is that sharing of knowledge, that, we all know how difficult it is to get good research, good information on the suitability of one product or the next. There's not one single recipe for us all, but the more we can share, the better it would be, the more resource efficient we would be. And yeah, we're really happy to advance in this direction. So thanks also for sharing all your insights with us. Both Peninsula Hotels and Accor have been signatories of the Global Tourism Plastics Initiative since 2020. But I am also happy to have with us today some of our new signatories joining the initiative, for example, Palladium Hotel Group. So my next question goes to Jose. Jose Hernandez Bautista is Regional Quality and Process Improvement Senior Manager Europe at Palladium Hotel Group. Palladium Hotel Group has its home in Ibiza, Spain, and properties in other Spanish locations like Italy, Dominican Republic, Mexico, Jamaica, and Brazil. Jose, could you share with us how you have been addressing plastics in your operations, especially as your headquarters are placed in the Balearic Islands, which I would say are a front-running destination when it comes to regulations in the area of plastics and waste. And we've heard already about the importance of regulations. So, and also what motivated you to join us in the initiative? The floor is yours.
Oh, hello, Virginia. Thank you for letting us be part of this panel. It's a pleasure to be here today. As you mentioned, our headquarters are here in the Balearic Island, where we have very strict and pioneer, I would say, recent law. It was launched in March this year, and it not only regulates the single-use plastic, it regulating all kind of waste. So the goal of this law is to have a waste reduction 20% by 2030. So we are already accelerating this process because, as I said, it started on the 20th of March. We are not able to use any longer single-use plastic or single-use cardboard inside our hotels. So for us, it's been challenging because now we are finding, or we are trying to accelerate and find new items that we can change for these all items that we have been working. I mean, we did all the rooms. Most of our hotels has paper in the rooms or dispensers, but now we are focusing on F&B. We are working with suppliers to have dispenser for jam or yogurt or water that many of the people here probably are using in their properties. But we are also seeing ways of replace cardboard coffee cups for takeaway. We are using melamine coffee cups that you can reuse every single time. As Joshua said, I believe it's not always easy to find the right solution with our suppliers. We are working with the innovation departments, and sometimes it's a two-way communication because they are not always providing the right product the first time. So we need to provide feedback from the feedback from our guests and see what are they providing, say, no, you need to change this is not working for us. So it's always a process. And regarding what has motivated us to join the plastic initiative, apart from sharing the common vision about the plastic pollution and our commitment to have a better planet, for us, being part of this initiative is going to help us to set the goals, plastic reduction goals for elimination across the 6 countries where we are operating hotels. Until now, we have been working with local entities, local associations, but we don't have a global goal for all our properties or destinations. So now, by this being signatories of this initiative, now we will have a single or goals across all the properties. So that is important for us.
Thank you so much. I'm sure you will be playing a catalytic effect in those locations where maybe the regulatory environment is not as advanced, and you can for sure export some of your learnings. I have to say my favorite of your dispensers under testing is the Nutella dispenser. I'm really looking forward to testing that one. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. And of course, we look forward to continue welcoming accommodation businesses and other stakeholders to the initiative. But please allow me to take a moment now. If I can get up the slide with the signatories, the new signatories, I'd like to take a moment to officially welcome the 32 organizations which have joined the Global Tourism Plastics Initiative since we had our last event in March. As you can see, they are representing all kinds of stakeholders in the tourism value chain, including destinations, tour operators, small accommodation businesses, and supporting organizations, among others. So really, thank you all very much for your commitment. I know that many of you are connected. So it's really a pleasure to have you on board of this network, which has been steadily growing since we launched in January 2020, despite COVID times, thanks to your efforts, and that now counts 93 signatories. Thank you. Let me move on to our fourth speaker now, Madhu. Question is for you. Madhu Rajesh is the CEO of the Sustainable Hospitality Alliance. The Sustainable Hospitality Alliance is a charity that brings together engaged hospitality companies and uses the collective power of the industry to deliver impact both locally and globally. You have joined the Global Tourism Plastics Initiative with the role of supporting organization, given your not-for-profit status. And we are convinced of the potential of the Alliance to create a multiplier effect. Could you tell us a bit about how you have supported the industry to address plastic pollution? And what are your plans to continue supporting the implementation of a circular economy of plastics?
Yeah. Thank you, Virginia. And I know we've been in conversations for a very long time about joining the initiative. So delighted to be finally on board with it. Sustainable Hospitality Alliance has actually been working on the issue of single-use plastics since 2014, when we first launched our environmental guideline for hotels, which is like many of our resources, a public resource freely available to download from our website, and really just talks to the hotel audience and guides them through how to think about key environmental issues, including single-use plastics. So it's been an important issue for us for a while, and several of our member companies have been working on it for the last decade or so as well. Our reason for joining the initiative now was because the issue of single-use plastics is in the spotlight much more than it was in previous years. And it is almost becoming an imperative. It is an imperative for any hotel of any size across the world to actually now begin to take action on single-use plastics if they haven't already, because of the increased consumer and guest awareness on the issue, and also because as an industry, we want to operate as responsibly for our environment as possible. We have 13 member companies at the moment that represent organizations of different size and scale and different geographic footprint, which gives us a really good insight into the structure of the industry, the unique issues and challenges. And we find very often the large companies can scale up initiatives at a much larger level. But equally, we find the smaller companies are often very entrepreneurial and very nimble and very innovative with the solutions that they design and create. And that gives us a really good diversity of perspectives and challenges around the table. We find that very often the large brands are under a lot of pressure to act, rightly so, because with size and scale comes great responsibility. But equally, we want to have a catalytic impact across the industry. It is important that we look at every hotel, regardless of size, regardless of geographic location and ownership structure, acting collectively on it, because that's when we make real change to happen. And we feel that actually with our knowledge, with our expertise and our charitable status, there's a role for an organization to play in helping hotels get started. Because if you look at the industry, there are different stages of maturity where there's a role to help organizations right at the start, the business of others before them. Equally, there are organizations in the middle at a faster pace, and the front runners that want to learn and do more innovative things on the issues, bringing in learnings outside the industry as well.
Madhu? Oh, I think she's having a connection issue.
Yeah, I had a glitch. Hopefully I'm back.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
So I was just saying, we feel it's our role to meet organizations at different stages of their journey and help them make progress by meeting them where they are. And that's what we've been trying to do. So as part of our commitment, we will be looking at working closely with UNWTO, UN Environment, and Ellen MacArthur Foundation to make sure the initiative is as relevant for different businesses in the hospitality industry as possible, but also working to co-create or lead on the creation of a number of tools and resources that will help the industry progress. And they could be simple resources on how to get started, but equally there could be more advanced tools on how you measure progress in the initiative and report against it. So a whole spectrum of resources we hope to be able to create. I'd also like to talk about some examples of good practice from the industry. So I'd mentioned one of our hotel members, Scandic, has been working on the initiative in the Scandinavian countries since 2008. And there are some very innovative things that they've done to eliminate single-use plastics from their operations, and also in terms of staff training and different actions that they've taken. Likewise, Sudiva, which is a luxury hotel group, small, about 4 hotels in premium destinations, has been working on circular economy now for nearly 10 years. And they've helped in certain islands, like in Maldives, eliminate hundreds of thousands of plastic bottles from operations and actually look at glass alternatives, and created a financially viable circular economy model. And, we'd love to showcase examples like that to other participants in the initiative. ITC Hotels, a hotel group in India, created a multi-stakeholder task force to really look at items of plastics they were using, both front of house and back of house. Very often when we talk about plastics, we are talking about front of house items, but really to take a holistic approach and go through their inventory and figure out what can be reduced, reused, or recycled, and eliminate many of the problematic single-use items. And those are the kind of initiatives that don't often get spoken about because they're probably not brands that are always in the limelight or prominence. And I think by showcasing many of those, we will make faster progress as well. So we are here. We believe in partnerships linked with UN SDG 17 and looking forward to working with all of you in collaboration to drive progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madhu, for the exciting prospects. I think we are all looking forward as well, and definitely by exporting the knowledge of those companies that maybe have more resources to invest in research, or that have the capability, more human resources to also implement. We can support the smaller ones, right? The small businesses, which in many occasions are quite leading ones and doing quite extraordinary things, I have to say. We will see very soon a good example. But as we're looking forward to traveling again, we thought, and also reaching a bit the end of the panel, we thought for a shift in gears that we would introduce our last speaker in the panel with a video that at least helps us travel virtually for a couple minutes. No? She's Sibyl Wright-Miller, founder and director of Chumba Island Coral Park in Zanzibar, Tanzania. Can I get the video of Chumba, Edgardo, please?
I'm Tabitha Miller. I'm an educational planner and have worked most of my life in the aid industry. And when I came to Zanzibar in '91 for a consultancy with, this was a Finnish aid on environment education, action plan, what can be done. So I negotiated for 4 years with 7 government ministries for this Chumba Island to be turned into a marine park, which is not for profit. It is for conservation and for education.
Since the education program has started here, more than 7,000 people has reached on island through the education program. And this is very important because for the school education trip, we prepare these kids to be the future, conservationists, future fishermen, and the future people who will look after their resources.
Education has been the backbone of the project from the very beginning. I'm an educationist, so that's the main motivation why I did it.
When they are here, they get a full training, and when they go back, actually we expect them to be peer educator to their school.
The main objective of Chumba is for protection of coral reefs.
Yeah, I have a message for those tourists. First, I tell them they are warmly welcome to Chumba Island because we have a unique thing which available in Chumba. Is only Chumba which able to do environmental conservation in a 100%. Nothing else. If they want to prove it, welcome to Chumba. We'll prove it.
Thanks for the great video, Sibyl. I mean, we just saw the clear educational role that Chumba Island is playing. It's very well portrayed. And as I mentioned before, I hope that Global Tourism Plastics Initiative can also play an educational and enabling role for those that are smaller or starting the journey of a circular economy of plastics. In your case, the circular economy has always been an integral part of your operations. Could you share with us some recommendations or good practices that small businesses could consider implementing?
Yeah, thank you, Roxana. Yeah, I mean, Chumba is not only a medium-sized company because, medium means less than 250 employees, so we are medium. But even in the European Union, more than 99% of companies are SMEs, small and medium. And this is, I think, also the case in the global tourist industry. The majority of companies in tourism are small and medium and even micro, and especially in the global south. And I'm also a little bit speaking here for the global south because I think I'm the only one where our conditions are very different, the ones we find and the ones we operate in. We are mostly working in pre-industrial societies and of course a huge gap between rich and poor. And our environment is very different from the one in the global north. And we have to ask ourselves, by introducing tourism, are we not also exporting a very wasteful and overconsumptive way of life into the global south when we want our tourists to get the same amenities they have in our global north? And we think as tourism, we need to operate differently in a much broader sense. So plastic waste avoidance and plastic recycling is only part of the equation. We also need to consider the other huge crisis of the planet. That's, of course, climate change and biodiversity loss, which is huge, which is causing now the 6th mass extinction. And tourism has the particular and huge potential for helping biodiversity and ecosystem conservation directly, because our industry is actually not taking out resources. It can destroy them, but it's not taking them out. So we pay for looking at them. We pay at looking at the coral reef. We pay for looking at the rainforest, and we go away. Well managed, then we leave no footprint. But of course, over-tourism is a huge problem. Now, Chumba is an investment in conservation from the very beginning. So the package was from the very beginning conservation. We made a private marine park and forest reserve, which provides free education for Zanzibaris. It's all paid by the Small Eco Lodge, 100% funded by the Eco Lodge. And this became the first private marine park in the world and the first one which actually fully funds park management and education from the Eco Lodge. So that was really the very first at the time. And we have also reached now more than 11 Zanzibaris for free, schools, teachers, also government officials, fishermen, community members, and we provide the same education, which means it's a huge nature experience to our guests. And the guests are the only ones paying for it. The rest is for free. And of course, to protect a reserve like Chumba with the forest and above all the coral reef, we needed a very innovative eco-lodge design. So 100% of operations is solar, photovoltaic, solar, water heating. Water is provided by rainwater. We have also composting toilets, so there's no black water. And also gray water from the showers and the kitchen is filtered through artificial plant beds or vegetative plant filtration. So our impact or footprint is already minimal. And of course, part of the package was from the very beginning, avoiding any plastic, especially single-use plastic. I would say any plastic. And I have to say, when I came to Zanzibar in 1990, there was no tourism and there was no plastic, not even to mention single-use plastic. And with the entry of tourism into that country, which of course has boomed over the last 30 years, today it's a very attractive and loved destination, very famous, we got really an avalanche of plastic coming into the country and plastic pollution. So we have to address this. Now for Chumba, I mean, from the beginning, we did not use any single-use plastic and hardly any plastic at all. I mean, everything is recycled, everything is reused multiple times until it's totally destroyed. We have, of course, to address the problem that plastic is washed up on our beaches every day, massively, which is a new phenomenon. It wasn't there for 30 years ago. There wasn't that plastic pollution in the ocean. It's more serious even in the coral reef, as you can imagine, around the world now, and contributing to loss of biodiversity because turtles eat plastic, fish eat plastic, and so it goes back into our food chain, as we know. It's a health issue. So we need to address this, not as an operation of Chumba, but we need to do this on a more systemic level. So we operate as a GDPI ambassador at destination level. This means Zanzibar and Tanzania. And we do this partnering with local tourism associations. I'm on the board of several of them, partnering with local NGOs and the tourism sector, and lobbying the government for a greener, more sustainable, more inclusive tourism sector. And of course, we do our beach cleaning, we do campaigns in villages for turning plastic waste, collecting it, turning it into some artwork, which we can sell in our boutique, etc. But of course, recycling of plastic is very limited, as we know. And so the message is actually we have to use on policy level to regulate and massively reduce plastic usage, and that's the message we want to spread.
Thank you, Civil. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you here because I'd like to still try to allow one or two questions / comments from the audience, but I have to say that you have plenty of stories, good ones and best practice. I'd like to invite our audience to actually read those in the newsletter. We have just published an interview with the team there in Chumbe Coral Island Park, and they are I find it a really, really nice interview. So you can access the newsletter and read also about other signatories, and share your stories as well. I have to concur that in those locations where waste management is an issue, definitely the weight for the eliminate component, our strategy is eliminate, innovate, circulate, would have to be bigger or higher than in other locations where we can really circulate. But that's why we, I guess the main key takeaway of today is that we need to be mindful of the context and really base our decisions on evidence as much as possible. But anyway, just so that we can try to see if the audience has a question. Does anybody have a question or comment that they want to post on the chat or to address it to one of the speakers? Or in general, we have a few minutes left, but hurry because it's just a few. Edgardo, the audience can post on the chat, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, perfect. Do we have any questions? Yes, we will share the recording, of course. How to avoid plastic? Somebody's asking. It's we would have to elaborate on this question for a long time. It depends on the context. Our speakers have shared some examples. Do we have a more direct question? Here we go. Thank you. Joe Hendricks is asking, what are businesses doing about stock of single-use plastic if they will not use it before bans come into place? I have to say that we were researching about this. Sorry, I don't want to monopolize. But for example, in the EU with the directive, it is allowed to use the stock before, even when the ban comes into place, it's not retroactive. But maybe I let the ones operating in Europe reply to this. Julie, do you want to share some?
Do you want me to jump in? I think one of the key here is the first step that we mentioned earlier is anticipating on regulation, because anticipating actually allows you to start reducing stock before regulation kicks in. And as I was saying, yes, the directive in Europe and our internal regulations as well allow the hotels to actually finish up with their stocks. But we are monitoring closely to make sure that the hotels haven't stocked up before the regulation kicks in. So it's all a question of anticipating and getting started early on.
Thank you, Julie. I see another question from Neela Patti, and she says, how can we make sure that there is no plastic entering the ocean? What about the supply chain? Did you touch upon that? I think the references to suppliers and their key role were quite good. Joshua, maybe you want to recap a bit on how you're engaging suppliers, for example?
Yeah, sure. Definitely. I think this is more about a constant conversation with our suppliers, because sometimes, for example, when we work on our bathroom amenities renew, actually we have a lot of conversation with different suppliers, and we want to challenge them, ask them to, well, we tell them what we want in general, but we didn't goes to the specific specifications. Because we don't want to limit their the creativity. So I think what we're very happy to see is a lot of suppliers really, because especially I think a lot of them really take this as a challenge, because if they can have this partnership with the Peninsula Hotel or other big hotel chain, they can actually do a lot on that. And they really want to co-create a better future for the planet. So they are actually happily accepting the challenge. Of course, along the journey, there's a lot of different things that we have to go along, like the design, whether the material is really good enough. They also propose a few technology or new materials, and we have to review them. We have to do research. We have to do lab tests, testing. So these are the things. Is when it comes down to the details, there's actually a lot of things that we have to consider. And this is a long journey, I would say. In the past 2 years, until now, we're still reviewing a lot of new materials, and we still have to talk to them, jump on the calls and getting samples, things like that. We have to test it out, the product, whether it is durable, is this good enough for the brand, things like that. So hope this answered the question.
Thank you, Joshua. Thank you so much. There is one question on the first issue. So to provoke a bit conversation, Joe Hendricks is saying one of the issues was having too much stock because of COVID. So even if hotels plan to use up stock, they were closed, so they have more stock than anticipated. Reflections on that from my side, could be that, nobody could anticipate COVID, and it would also not be very environmental friendly to just toss the stock. So I guess that unfortunately we also have integrated new plastics due to COVID, but all these decisions have to be managed as temporary. I really hope that once COVID goes away, all those decisions can be revisited and revoked, and that we really get back on track at full speed on a circular economy of plastics. There's also a question from Fabrice Sorin, more on circular economy thinking. He says, 8% of waste streams emerged at the design stage of product and services. Do the panelists see the importance of system design, business design in implementing a circular, regenerative tourism operations? Somebody wants to jump on circular economy thinking?
Well, I can just jump in very briefly to say that we are indeed actively working with our design teams from step one. And that's a very important part of reducing the amount of materials you want to eliminate.
Thank you. Also, I would reiterate again the role of suppliers, that at the end of the day, circular economy is a concept that was designed for materials, and we are a service sector, but we have to identify which of the materials or products that we use to deliver our experience are actually subject of circularity. And to do that, we definitely need to establish a dialogue with suppliers and also with waste managers. That's a little bit more difficult, but we have to work on that. And right now, unfortunately, because I'm enjoying it very much, we would need to close our session. I think it's been great. Also provided a context on life cycle assessment for our discussions. Please do continue making the evidence-based decisions as much as possible. And looking forward to seeing you in our next webinar, which we will conduct before the end of the year. Please join us in the Global Tourism Plastics Initiative. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone in the panel. And of course, thanks to those in the backstage, Roxana, Edgardo, Alba, Esther, and on the side of UNEP, Svetlana, Virginie, Elena, and Sam. Thank you all so much for having made this webinar possible.
Thank you.
Well done,
Great,
Virginia.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good day, everyone.
Well done, Virginia, to keep everything together so well.
Thank you, Sibyl. With your help, it was possible. Thank you so much.
Thanks to all of you.
Thanks. Bye.
So when we get the recording to share this widely, Virginia, when will we get it about?
Very, very soon. I mean, we will start working on it as we close, and maybe even this afternoon it can be on the website. We will send you a link.
Wonderful.
You see, we have now stopped it.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, okay.